Okay. So hello, Jonathan. I don't think I have to present you, first because you spoke yesterday already, and second because you've been part of the community since dozens of years, I think. And today you told us that you would share your views about 21st century digital typography. So the mic is yours.
Yeah, thanks very much. The talk's a bit long. Can you start the video? There'll be questions and answers and a conclusion at the end of that. Thanks very much. So, welcome to this talk on 21st century digital typography. I'm pleased to have my friends Arthur Ogawa and Nelson Beebe as the studio audience, and so I feel supported and reassured by that. This talk has got an opening, which you're listening to, and a closing, which will come at the end, and 5 parts. I'll tell you what the parts are. The first is from fossils to the European Renaissance. The second is from 1865 to 1977. They're both important dates in the history of tech. The third is from 1982 to today. And 1982 is an important day in the history of tech, and today is too, because we're all here together. The fourth part is emerging problems and solutions. And the fifth part is 21st century digital typography. So the goal of the talk is to get a sort of historical view of things, and from that be able to understand better what might be coming in the future. So I'm restarting. So the first part is from fossils to the European Renaissance. That's a long period. A few billion years ago, life in the oceans made a big step. It started producing oxygen. The atmosphere became oxygenated, and that made an enormous change. So about 350 million years ago, there was life on land that was creating what we now know as fossil fuel, which is coal and gas and natural gas. And a few million years ago, the genus Homo, man, emerged. So when we emerged to the world, there had already been a long history. Now, at that time when we emerged, we almost certainly had song and dance, because birds and other animals have song and dance. About 250,000 years ago, the Neanderthals started making tools, and they were existing until about 40,000 years ago, and probably they became absorbed into the Homo sapiens that we know. And they probably had language. That's important for us, actually, as typesetters. We can't be anything without language. And human art and music probably arose about 40,000 years ago. So that's the time scale of human culture, if you like. And about 14,000 years ago, there was a really big change, which is that agriculture and settlement started to replace nomadic hunt and gather. So the ancient stories that were passed on through oral tradition, there's the Gilgamesh story in Mesopotamia about a flood. They probably go back to that sort of time of 14,000 or perhaps more years ago. And writing on tablet, which is where our game really starts, is about 5,000 years ago. So that's an enormous time span leading up to 5,000 years ago. There are some plants in the Namibian desert, I think they're called something like Welshia, that are very strange plants that have 2 leaves that keep growing, and they live to about 5,000 years old. So there are plants alive on Earth today that were alive when we started writing on tablets. I've read the ancient history, that's 3000 BC to 500 AD, has about 90 civilizations with written records. And that is a rich history, rich period that still influences our thought and culture. If we move on to the 1400s, there was something called the European Renaissance, which is people like Leonardo and Albrecht Dürer and all sorts of other people. And part of that was print. And the creation of printing by movable type was famous for Gutenberg and brought to the more modern form by Aldus Manutius. We'll come back to him later. So there, typography was born out of copying books by hand with pen and ink, and that's called calligraphy. And by the 20th century, there were massive printing presses producing millions of copies or more of each issue of a newspaper, which were then distributed on a national basis on the railways. So that's an enormous growth in the progress of dissemination of information. So that's taken us to the end of the Renaissance and perhaps a bit more. Start again. The next part of the talk is 1865 to 1977. Two important dates. The first of them is John Clerk Maxwell's publication of his treatise on electromagnetism. And 1977 was Donald Knuth seeing high quality digital typesetter output, which inspired him, together with the problem, to make tech. But we want to have a bit of a historical view, so I'll do some of the intermediary stages. And the time difference between the two, a century, is approximately the difference between Don Knuth writing tech and towards the end of the 21st century. So it gives us an idea of what can happen to create 21st century digital typography. So as I said, in 1865, John Clerk Maxwell unified electricity and magnetism. He built on the work of Faraday. This was followed by Hertz, who proved experimentally the existence of radio waves that could be used to transmit information. And this was followed by the Italian Giuseppe Marconi, who pioneered electrical wireless telegraphy. Isn't that a wonderful word? Wireless telegraphy. It was telegraphy. It's like the things we call automobiles now. We used to be called horseless carriages, so we have wireless telegraphy. And by about 1900, electrification was taking place on a wide scale. It's interesting that it was at first only for lighting, and so it was only at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, and it turned off during the office hours because there were no computers to run off electricity. But over time, all of this created relays for telephone exchanges, telephones, and radio valves. So everything was all set by the 1940s for electronic computers. And in the 1950s, I think, we got transistors. And in 1968, computer programming had then become quite an important business. And Donald Knuth was writing The Art of Computer Programming. So 1968 came the first volume of The Art of Computer Programming. In 1976, there was a major change in printing technology. It was called photo-optical typesetting. So it was a hybrid of photography and mechanical. And when Donald Knuth saw what his publisher was intending to do with The Art of Computer Programming using this photo-optical typesetting, he was very disappointed and didn't know what to do. But in 1977, he saw high-quality digital typesetting output at 1,000 dots per inch. And that persuaded him that the problem could be solved using computers all the way through, except to the last moment of producing the printing plate. So he started work on tech, I think, in 1978. And by 1982, he'd produced Tech 82, which in its fundamentals is the same as the tech we use now, the Don Knuth's tech that we use now. And anything from 1982, I think, will continue to run on the tech that we have today, which is an important part of Don Knuth's goal, which is to create a system that would produce identical results a century from now. So the next part of our talk is from 1982 to today. And here, the main point is there's been an enormous technological revolution. So somewhere around 1993, PDF was introduced, which greatly simplified the production of printing plates. And in particular, it opened the door to printing plates being directly produced without going through photographic media at all. You have something a bit like a laser printer, but it produces printing plates rather than images on paper. About that time, as I recall, HTML started coming out, and I'll come back to HTML again. In 1996, we had Tech Live on CD and then DVD. The CDs were new media, they were digital media, they revolutionized the gramophone industry. Some more features. We had the Raspberry Pi come out, I don't know, that about 10 years ago. About the same sort of time, we had mobile phones coming out, actually a few years before the Raspberry Pi. We had mobile phones, 3G, 4G. We had flat screen digital TVs, and we had broadband, and we had Wi-Fi. So to use the Olympic motto a bit, everything was bigger and faster and stronger. And the capabilities of the technology, in some sense, vastly outstripped the capabilities of the hardware, in some sense, outstripped the capabilities of the software. And one sign of that is the hardware is considerably more reliable than the software is today. So if we look at 1982 and compare it today, we've got so much more technology and stuff available to us. Stuff that wasn't available when Don Knuth wrote tech. The fourth part of the talk is emerging problems and solutions. This will be a little bit longer. Just as Gutenberg emerged out of the problem of hand copying Bibles, and the electrical industry emerged out of all sorts of other problems, such as something better than hunting whales in order to get candles. So we've got emerging problems in the 21st century. The first of them goes back to the fossils, fossil fuels, more exactly. We're burning the fossil fuels and we have global warming. That is one of the biggest problems of the 21st century. The second problem we've got is the COVID pandemic. And that is a harbinger for all manner of problems if we're unable to sort things out. I mention them not because I've got solutions, but because I hope we find solutions. And it's, to a certain degree, a social matter. The Renaissance was a social matter because it greatly enlarged the power of the market and the power of the enterprises. So having said that, I'm going to specialize on a problem I had myself this week. So I've got a picture of my setup for an online math summer school seminar, conducted by Zoom. And I've got two desks, one in front of the other. Why have I got that? Well, at the back of the two desks, there's a 40-inch 4K monitor, which is in fact a TV, that ordinarily I use as a computer monitor for my computer. And I sit at the back desk to do my computing work. But when I'm listening to the seminar talk, I find it easier to sit away from the monitor so I can see the whole monitor at a time. And so I put a table there as a workspace where I've got my papers and everything. And if you look back to the monitor, you can see in the top right corner somebody is giving a talk, and on the monitor itself, you can perhaps see some writing. The talk is being handwritten on a tablet. And the computer in the front is my laptop, which is in fact a Chromebook, and that's connected to the TV with an HDMI cable. And I'm using the Chromebook because it's got a microphone and a camera, and I don't have those for my main computer. Now, the whole thing is being conducted on Zoom, which is poor for chat and has a rubbish whiteboard. So the sharing of mathematical content is fine by speech. The speech works really well. I have to say that speech is one of the great things about Zoom conferences and so forth. The handwriting is on a tablet, and that works okay for most people. But there's a problem now, which are the exercises that we do after the talk. They're typeset in tech, beautifully typeset, and they're provided as PDFs, but the exercises are confined to the PDF. It's the only way to get the exercises, and so to speak, everybody in the work group looking at the same exercise, is to do screen sharing. What you can't do is you can't copy a bit of the PDF and put it onto the whiteboard. So that's a sort of problem. And the nature of the collaborative environment provided by a whiteboard and chat and shared audio is, how do we say, a little bit limited. Whereas if you want a proper video conference because you're leaders of the free world or G7 or something like that, you want a considerably more sophisticated setup. Now, I was working in software in the 1990s, early 90s, when one of my company's customers was HM Customs and Excise. And they had a video conference room in London connected to their main office, a clerical office in the South End. It was fantastic. There was a camera and we could see the people at the other end. And if we wanted to communicate a written document, we could use fax. The meeting happened to be on my birthday, so one of the people faxed me a piece of birthday cake. So that sort of video conferencing has changed since then, but we're not really up there. And we certainly don't have in Zoom the great facilities we seem to have with the message board chats, the sort of the IRC chat sort of thing. So there's emerging technologies and there's problems here. And as far as typesetting of mathematics at an online mathematics summer school, it's confined to two things. The one is the exercises in PDF, and the second is that people use tech notation in chat and on the whiteboard. There are other emerging problems that I haven't covered, and you probably know lots of them that I don't know. I hope that what I say will apply to other people's problems, to your problems, at least to some degree. The fourth part of the talk is emerging problems and solutions. This will be a little bit longer. Just as Gutenberg emerged out of the problem of hand copying Bibles, and the electrical industry emerged out of all sorts of other problems, such as something better than hunting whales in order to get candles. So we've got emerging problems in the 21st century. The first of them goes back to the fossils, fossil fuels, more exactly. We're burning the fossil fuels and we have global warming. That is one of the biggest problems of the 21st century. The second problem we've got is the COVID pandemic. And that is a harbinger for all manner of problems if we're unable to sort things out. I mention them not because I've got solutions, but because I hope we find solutions. And it's, to a certain degree, a social matter. The Renaissance was a social matter because it greatly enlarge the power of the market and the power of the enterprises. So having said that, I'm going to specialize on a problem I had myself this week. So I've got a picture of my setup for an online math summer school summer school conducted by Zoom. And I've got two desks, one in front of the other. Why have I got that? Well, at the back of the two desks, there's a 40-inch 4K monitor, which is in fact a TV, that ordinarily I use as a computer monitor for my computer. And I sit at the back desk to do my computing work. But when I'm listening to the seminar talk, I find it easier to sit away from the monitor so I can see the whole monitor at a time. And so I put a table there as a workspace where I've got my papers and everything. And if you look back to the monitor, you can see in the top right corner, somebody is giving a talk. And on the monitor itself, you can perhaps see some writing. The talk is being handwritten on a tablet. And the computer in the front is my laptop, which is in fact a Chromebook, and that's connected to the TV with an HDMI cable. And I'm using the Chromebook because it's got a microphone and a camera, and I don't have those for my main computer. Now, the whole thing is being conducted on Zoom, which is poor for chat and has a rubbish whiteboard. So the sharing of mathematical content is fine by speech. The speech works really well. I have to say that speech is one of the great things about Zoom conferences and so forth. The handwriting is on a tablet, and that works okay for most people. But there's a problem now, which are the exercises that we do after the talk. They're typeset in tech, beautifully typeset, and they're provided as PDFs, but the exercises are confined to the PDF. It's the only way to get the exercises, and so to speak, everybody in the work group looking at the same exercise, is to do screen sharing. What you can't do is you can't copy a bit of the PDF and put it onto the whiteboard. So that's a sort of problem. And the nature of the collaborative environment provided by a whiteboard and chat and shared audio is, how do we say, a little bit limited. Whereas if you want a proper video conference because you're leaders of the free world or G7 or something like that, you want a considerably more sophisticated setup. Now, I was working in software in the 1990s, early 90s, when one of my company's customers was HM Customs and Excise. And they had a video conference room in London connected to their main office, a clerical office in the South End. It was fantastic. There was a camera and we could see the people at the other end. And if we wanted to communicate a written document, we could use fax. The meeting happened to be on my birthday, so one of the people faxed me a piece of birthday cake. So that sort of video conferencing has changed since then, but we're not really up there. And we certainly don't have in Zoom the great facilities we seem to have with the message board chats, the sort of the IRC chat sort of thing. So there's emerging technologies and there's problems here. And as far as typesetting of mathematics at online mathematics summer school, it's confined to two things. The one is the exercises in PDF, and the second is that people use tech notation in chat and on the whiteboard. There are other emerging problems that I haven't covered, and you probably know lots of them that I don't know. I hope that what I say will apply to other people's problems, to your problems, at least to some degree. The fifth and final part of our talk is a definition of 21st century digital typography. We'll start by looking at three events in 1494, 1982, and 1989 that are important to the history of typography. In 1494, the Venetian printer Aldus Manutius created what I regard as the first recognizable version of a modern printing house. How did he differ from Gutenberg? Well, he used basically the same technology, but the social side was very different. The emerging literate class of the Renaissance was his audience and financial backers. He produced the predecessor of the modern paperback, books that you could put in your pocket, no longer chained to libraries. He commissioned the first italic fonts and fonts for Greek and Latin. He produced accurate copies based upon multiple handwritten copies of Dante's Inferno. Aldus Manutius had an opportunity, the emerging wealthy classes of the Renaissance. He had a problem, bringing the classical Greek works to that audience using existing technology. And he found a solution, which was the establishment and great success of the Aldine Press. Don Knuth's opportunity arose from the emergence of transistorized electronic computers in the 1950s, followed by large-scale integration in semiconductor memory in the 1960s. It also arose from the social class of computer programmers and the importance to them of algorithms. His problem was retaining the typographic quality of his life work, the art of computer programming. The output from the new photo-optical typesetting machines was inferior to the hot metal methods previously used. His solution was the creation of tech, which we all know and love. He took advantage of the opportunities presented to him in 1977 of the emerging high-quality digital typesetters. After Manutius in 1494 and Knuth in 1982, our third event was Tim Berners-Lee in 1989. His opportunity was based on the internet and the resulting social network of digitally connected scholars and researchers, particularly in mathematics and physics. The CERN particle accelerator was also part of his opportunity. At CERN, the inefficiency and difficulty of finding and obtaining information stored on different computers was a problem. It was an obstacle to the work of CERN and its worldwide collaborators. Tim Berners-Lee solved this problem in 1989 by inventing the web server, the web browser, and the HTTP protocol for communication between browser and server. The rest, as they say, is history. Thanks to his work and that of the organizers, the 2021 Tech Conference is taking place online, with many participating from their own homes. By the way, Aldus Manutius founded the New Academy, a group of Hellenistic scholars. Don Knuth and his colleagues founded the Tech Users Group, and Tim Berners-Lee founded the World Wide Web Consortium for Web Standards. We'll now give a definition of 21st century digital typography. It has three components, namely opportunity, problem, and solution. But first, I give a definition of 20th century digital typography. Briefly, it's what Don Knuth pioneered. It is using computers to produce paginated output that can be previewed on screen and also turned into printing plates for the production of books. As in hot metal typography, the primary output is books and journals, but using a different process. The new process automatically generates an index and table of contents and provides an on-screen preview. PDF enhances preview and provides hyperlinks. Sometimes words evolve new meanings. Consider the word telescope telegram, and wireless. From about 1600, we've had telescopes. It comes from the Greek for far seeing. Similarly, telegram means far writing. The electrical telegraph flourished from 1850 to 1950. Guglielmo Marconi in 1909 received a Nobel Prize for his development of wireless telegraphy. And now wireless means an audio variant of television. And it's also a way to connect to the internet. Here's my definition of 21st century digital typography. It already has opportunities and problems. The solution will have emerged by 2070. The social and technical opportunities are provided by the connected online social world pioneered by the World Wide Web and our many digital devices. These include broadband, streaming audio and video, 4K TVs, laptop and tablet PCs, mobile phones, and 4G networks, with 5G to come soon. One problem for us is that books and journals are now much more read and dealt with only online. Another is the visual output of web pages is inferior in important ways to the typesetting that Don Knuth provided. Accessibility is another problem. I see 21st century digital typography as part of a worldwide information management and distribution system, which includes indexing, linking, searching, and online interaction. I see it as a successor to 20th century digital typography. I see Tim Berners-Lee and those who created HTML5 as important pioneers of 21st century digital typography. I very much hope to see it with tech taking a central role in my own lifetime. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah. I'd like very much to apologize for repeating myself. I am not skilled with command line video editing, which is what I was doing, and I didn't have time yesterday to check everything. There's only one thing I want to say now, which is to thank Arthur Ogawa and Nelson Bieber for the great help they provided, both as the studio audience and for preliminary discussions that led up to the talk. Any mistakes and errors and flubs and everything else in the talk are all down to me. I'll now stop and ask for questions and contributions, if that's all right.
Thank you for this really impressional video, and there was no problem. Repeating is also a good thing.
You can say that again.
Are there any questions? I have one, a bit broad maybe.
Good.
In your talk, aren't you in fact interrogating the limit between hardware and software? A limit that appeared recently at the 20th century, but that now exists.
Sorry, I didn't understand what it
is
you say.
When you speak about your problems for video conference, you show us your hardware that is not completely suitable, so you use software to correct the limit. There is probably an interplay between things that you have to buy that are expensive, your screens, your various links between the computer and screens and everything, and the software that should be cheap, that's just intellectual property, and that's really versatile, adaptable. And I think you're trying to adapt your hardware using software, and you're asking questions about what to adapt to correct your problems on.
I think what we've got is a bit of a sort of fragmented experience. So we've got the mobile phone, we've got the radio. So at the conference I went to, we had Zoom for the tutorials. We had Slack for chat and Gather for socializing, and we had PDF for the exercises. And the things didn't sort of fit together. There wasn't a sort of common timeline, and the inability to, tech was isolated into being a way of producing PDF at the conference. It was just a way of PDF. There was also a notation you could use on the whiteboard. So people would write tech formulas in the whiteboard. It was peculiar using typing. And I'm finding that things sort of don't work well together. I think Apple produced devices that are easy to use, and particularly the Apple phone, and that's their big selling point. And tech, the tech revolution, if you like, was part of home typesetting. You could typeset at home, but now we have home video studios and home broadcasting and home networking and everything else. And the whole medium of communication is really changing. Just as the wireless and television changed in the 20th century, so the internet is a big change to communication in the 21st. And in that setting where everything is so dynamic, the idea of pagination seems a bit strange. I think that in some sense, HTML has got the right idea of a page. A page is a piece of information you want to read, and not a long scroll that's been broken up into pieces, which is the tech view. And the ability now to, it should be possible now to view diverse parts of the same document at the same time, which is what an outliner does. But we can't do that with the printed documents, and we can't pull a bit of a document from one place and put it on our screen. Another example of this is at this conference, we have Beamer slides. Now, I can't think of a worse way to transmit a Beamer slide to an audience live than to do it by a video screen share. Why don't you just transmit the Beamer slide, or the source for the Beamer slide, to all the participants, and then have something that makes sure that all the participants see the same page at the same time, so that when the speaker moves forward one page, all the other pages move forward one. So it's a sort of synchronized reading, as you might do in a school, where one person is reading out from a book and the other people are reading the book at the same time. So I think the gist of my talk is this: we can't repeat the same experiment and expect the same results. Knuth's experiment was improving digital typography for print, for PDF and that sort of stuff. We can't forever go improving our print output and expect to still be top of the pile. The whole world is changing, is continuing to change, and we have to look at the opportunities that exist, which are really very different. And we also have to look at the problems that exist, are also very different. And that's why I was saying at the end that the people that created and promoted HTML5, which is a really magnificent platform for displaying the information of typeset information as you would with PDF on screen. That's why I think we have to sort of look at things in a completely different way. And at the conference yesterday, there were two very, very good talks on accessibility by Alexei Kolesnikov, Almanaki, Michael Cantino, and Rob Bees of Volga on the one hand, and Michael Nolan, Tom Pagano, Suas Chiki-Langala, and Rahul Jajwal. And they were dealing with accessibility, which is really a new problem. And I see them as doing what was necessary to solve the problem with the opportunities that existed without being hidebound by tradition. And last year, Martin Ruckert gave a very, very nice talk about dynamic line breaking in a mobile device that uses text algorithms. So those are the sorts of things that I see a 21st century typography being. And I've no idea what the world will look like in 2050, and I won't see it in 2070. But if we don't lay the foundations now, then we have the risk of being isolated and the break, or there being a break of continuity. Sorry, I've given another talk. There must be somebody who has something to say here.
Are there any other questions? We still have several minutes, so that's a good opportunity to chat about problems. Past problems also that don't exist any longer and for which we keep the bad solutions.
Say that again.
I'm still thinking about everything you told them, and I think there are problems that don't exist any longer, but for which we keep bad solutions. For example, when you speak about the notion of page, that's a piece of information. That's a solution to lower the cost of books. Instead of having a big roll or something like that, we cut small pieces of paper and we bound them to make books. So we have pages. That's a solution to a problem that we had previously when books had to be hardware things. Now we are doing a lot of things online. And as you told, we don't need any longer to have pages, but we keep the physical pages on our screens.
I understand very much what you're saying.
And so I feel we're keeping a bad solution to a problem that doesn't exist any longer.
Yeah, let me take another example, which is printing was a solution to the problem of the high cost of scribes. And reproduction on paper was the way printing worked. But we don't need to print anymore if we've got perfectly good screens that we can look at. And here's another, here you've hit the nail there, because there was something called blockbuster videos, which are now dwindled to one store. And there was something called DVDs, which are now being replaced by streaming. So to see, DVDs was a solution to the low quality of videos. But the videos were a solution to the problem of distribution of films. And now we've got the internet, we could just stream everything. So nowadays, computers don't have DVD players in them. I recently considered buying a new case for my next computer and discovered it didn't even have a bay in which you could put a DVD writer. So yes, I think you put it very nicely that we keep using old solutions to problems that are no longer there. There may be more to it as well, but that's a nice way of putting it. I really think I should re-record this talk, and I welcome any contributions people can make to us. It's time to stop now, isn't it? And go on to the next talk.
Yes, I can see that Andre and Peter are ready. But if we can still, if there are questions, it's still time to ask them, and maybe Jonathan can answer them during the break. Don't forget that we also have Topia and Zulip to interact. I put some links to your tech hour on Zulip, so hopefully.
Oh, thank you very much.
hopefully next Thursday you will have some more people coming. I watched some replays on YouTube, and that's really interesting. I think I will join at some point. Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you again, Jonathan.